Whom the Gods Fear, by Wdowski. Chapter 43. It took them an hour to recoup from a battle and get up enough energy to begin removing the A-er-shwa bodies that blocked the entrance ways of the buildings. The medical team gave aid to the few they found still alive, tried to help them as best they could. Beyond their walls, the peasant army was piling the bodies of the A-er-shwa's dead or dying and setting them aflame. The stench of burnt flesh was heavy in the air. The peasants' own wounded were being given the best medical care possible. Their dead were gently laid out to be identified. At the northern breach, 10 A-er-shwa riders appeared. Behind them, 6 humans and 1 A-er-shwa female were being pulled by ropes tied around their wrists. Mounted on the lead animal was A-roth. He smiled as he spotted Glen. Glen easily recognized that A-roth was pulling Demi behind him. A-roth's comrades were pulling Demi's 5 surviving crewmen and Demi's wife, A-er-shwa. Glen, Mahan, and Stovall walked up to A-roth. "I had feared the worst for you," Glen said to A-roth as Stovall translated for him. A-roth apologized that he had not contacted them again. He explained through Stovall that it was the shortcoming of A-er-shwa adults, their inability to retain new lessons. He had forgotten how to deactivate the 4-armcom they had given him. He worried that the device might give away his position. He damaged it when he tried to remove it. He explained to them that the A-er-shwa patrols were too numerous for him to get close enough to their northern camps. Instead, he ventured to the second nearest town. When he arrived there by sunrise, he found the town in great despair. All their grain and livestock for miles around had been pillaged by the A-er-shwa. The town's people were extremely angry and concerned that they were not left enough food to feed their families. A-roth spoke to them, rallying them to fight back. He told them how the humans had repelled the A-er-shwa assault just a few days ago. How the humans cut their numbers by a third. Only a handful against thousands. A-roth with great pride explained how he had convinced the peasants to take up arms, to stand with the humans. To fight and stop the A-er-shwas and their masters from ever oppressing them again. He told them how he learned from the humans that on their home world no man owns another. How each family owns their own home and do not pay rent to a master. He told them that humans keep the fruits of their labor, no others have the right to take them from them. Stovall translated. He says he told them that you, Mr. Yeager, were just a man, but a man that the gods feared. That they should all fight alongside you and throw off the yoke of A-er-shwa and possessor tyranny. The town's people sent out riders in all directions to spread the word. To come here to fight with us. Glen reached up his hand to A-roth, clutching his right forearm, as A-roth responded by wrapping his 6-finger hand also around Glen's right forearm. They gave each other a Roman handshake as Glen spoke to A-roth. "You and your people are the ones who made history today. Not me, A-roth." Stovall translated and A-roth smiled, tightening his grip in friendship with Glen. Demi stood with his men behind the mounts, silently listening. They all looked beaten and exhausted. Their heads all lowered in disgrace. Only the A-er-shwa still held her head up high, in defiance. Glen uncomfortably stepped over the dead bodies of A-er-shwas at his feet to approach Demi. He raised his head just enough to address Glen, who now stood in front of him. "Why couldn't you have just left us alone? So you and your men could continue playing gods?" Glen asked him. Demi raised his head a little higher in defiance. "We made things better for these people," he defended his actions. "Not much better. You still had them enslaved to their own lands. You still let those in power live off these people's sweat and toil. So what? They were no worse off than before we arrived at this world." "That may be true, but you forget one very important thing, Captain Demi." "What is that?" "You took this world with what did not belong to you. The Chinese wheat, their medical virus, the rare earth elements, and the antimatter rifles. None of those things were yours to use to play God. They were mine. It took me years to make that trade deal go through. Because of your actions, you're stealing what belonged to me. I lost my company. I lost my home." Demi lowered his head again. "Are you not a god? How can you let him speak to you that way?" The A-er-shwa spitted her words at Demi, no longer in her seductive cooing voice. Her tone reminded Glen of Rebecca Stern. Again, as with Rebecca, he was amazed how such a beautiful woman could become so ugly. Glen ignored the A-er-shwa's outburst. "The worst thing is your actions caused the EGG to falsely accuse the Chinese of your disappearance. which, as I told you before, has caused a chain of events that are leading to the first Interstellar War. All because you wanted to play God and for the sexual affections of a woman. Glen glanced in disgust at A-er-shwa, who was still hurling curses at Demi in a mix of English and A-er-shwa. Demi could not respond. Even as A-er-shwa badgered him to respond back to Glen, he only lowered his head further. The next day after the battle, the Marco Polo was able to send down additional unmanned probes loaded with the needed parts for the shuttle's repairs. The bulk of the peasant army had taken back their food stocks and began to return to their homes. Many of the younger peasants, at just 20 cycles, stayed with A-roth. A-roth, without a doubt, had unintentionally established himself as a new leader among his people. At A-roth's dining room table that morning, Glen warned A-roth of the responsibility that was falling upon him. He explained to him that taking a country was much easier than maintaining it, helping it grow and prosper. The battle that ended yesterday will not be their last. All the remaining regions still controlled by the possessors, overseers, and the Amphrothars in this hemisphere will not respond kindly to their victory. Their peasant uprising and success is a threat to their status quo. They will try to crush him and his people. It will be much like the response of the European kingdoms to the French Revolution and the rise of the French Republic. They will try to stamp them out, hoping their revolt and success does not spread to their regions. He will have to learn to defend what they have gained from these outside forces. Glen also warned A-roth of an even deadlier threat to their success for liberation. An internal threat. He warned A-roth that with power, there is always the risk of becoming what he and his people have just overthrown. A-roth, through his daughter, thanked Glen for his wise words. He understood that their struggle for liberty and self-determination was not over. He promised Glen he will guard against becoming just a new master over his people. Glen promised A-roth that once the shuttles were repaired and before the Marco Polo's hyper-engines were back online, they will use their 3D printers to supply them with new weapons that could help him organize a citizen army to defend their borders from any possible invasions. He can also help him establish their own constitution to ensure they can maintain a true government of the people and by the people, without masters, and protecting the rights of the individual. A-roth reached out to Glen, giving him another Roman handshake, his alien eyes filled with tears as he thanked Glen. My father says that those who came to us before as gods never offered us so much. I am not offering you anything more than to show you how you can do it for yourselves. Glen answered, But the weapons, Dorwa? You will give them to us. No, I will trade for them. Hopefully, if I can stop this war that threatens my world, I will return here. You can pay back then with Xingni's wheat seed and the medical viruses Demi brought to your world. My people can use them both. You're planning to manufacture pulse plasma rifles for them? Mayhan asked Glen. Glen turned to the captain. Nothing that destructive. I think we can produce some old-fashioned conventional gunpowder rifles. We can reprogram the venture's maintenance bots to teach their blacksmith apprentices to produce more on their own. Our chemist can teach their herbal medicine apprentices how to produce the gunpowder. That should do the job against Amphrothar armor. Mayhan agreed, and give them a major range advantage. 5 days after the defeat of the Amphrothar army, the science and engineering teams finally had the shuttles up and running. Glen had already sent Demi in restraints, and the severely injured Jones up to the Polo, escorted by 4 Marines and a medic. Demi had requested that his wife A-er-shwa join him. To the shock of all the humans, and especially Captain Demi, she responded to his request by lifting her tunic, denouncing her husband as a loser in A-er-shwa 6 times as she spat from her mouth and her lower feminine orifice after each verbal denunciation. It was the traditional A-er-shwa female divorce ritual. With her tunic still pulled up around her waist, she wrapped her legs around one of Glen's legs and hugged him tightly with her arms. She cooed to him to take her as one of his wives in A-er-shwa and in English. Her tongue began to reach up towards Glen's ear. Before she could, and had responded by grabbing the alien female by the back of her hair and pulling her off Glen. A-er-shwa fell back onto her rear and hissed at Dr. Hogan, and wrapped her arms around Glen and looked down on A-er-shwa, saying one of the few A-er-shwa words she had learned. Thou-ru. Thou-ru. Glen asked her. She turned to Glen. It means mine. The 5 crewmen that had survived the battle begged Glen to allow them to stay on A-er-shwa. They wished to stay with their wives and promised Glen they would help A-roth and his new government take hold and defend against any future attacks by the surrounding feudal states still dominated by the Amphrathars. Against Anne's and Captain Mahan's advice, he decided to grant the men's request. He told them they were to answer to A-roth only. He also assured them he would return to this world to check back on their progress. Glen said his goodbyes to A-roth and flawed. He promised them in much less ominous tone that he would return as soon as he could. Glen climbed aboard the last shuttle with Dr. Hogan and Captain Mahan back to the Marco Polo, which was preparing to make its first jump back to the Xing system. The end.